I gave 10 years of my life to a company I built with my uncle. I designed the entire logistics system, hired the first team, brought in our biggest clients. Then, one day, I was forced to sell my shares at a price they decided. They said it was just business, but when the tables turned, 18 months later, I made sure they remembered who really built everything. My name is Marcus Lee, and for most of my 30s, I lived and breathed logistics. Not the kind you casually mention in a meeting, but the real messy, blood and coffee logistics, routing systems, warehouse ops, freight optimization, late-night driver schedules, you name it. I built all of it from scratch. After finishing my MBA at the University of Texas at Austin, I didn't jump into corporate America like most of my classmates. Instead, I partnered with my uncle Raymond Collins, a seasoned industry vet who had decades of experience in freight brokerage but lacked the technical expertise to modernize operations. Together, we co-founded Collins and Lee Logistics in Dallas, Texas. The pitch was simple use cutting-edge tech to streamline mid-size freight coordination for manufacturing hubs across the Southwest. He brought in the industry, know-how, and network. I brought in the system software and strategy. The first year was brutal. I slept more on a futon in our office than in my apartment. I spent nights configuring routing software, patching together an ERP system with duct tape and code, and designing dashboards that even old-school dispatchers could use without a manual. I interviewed our first 5 employees personally. We couldn't afford recruiters or even a proper HR department, but we grew fast. By year 3, we had 60 full-time employees, a satellite office in Tulsa, and a dozen contracts with auto parts manufacturers and agricultural suppliers. We weren't the biggest player in Texas, but we were the most efficient. Our delivery rate accuracy was over 97%, and that alone got the attention of major clients. Inside the company, people respected me not because I was a co-founder, but because I did the work. If a server crashed at 2 a.m., I was the one fixing it. If a driver complained about poor routing, I listened, tweaked the algorithm, and followed up. My uncle handled client dinners and board meetings. I handled everything that kept the wheels turning. And to be fair, at least in the beginning, he gave me credit for that. He'd introduce me as the brain behind our operation. At every quarterly meeting, he made sure the board knew that Marcus built this thing. He even said once during a staff holiday party that without me, we'd still be scribbling routes on a whiteboard. I believed we were building something that would last a legacy for both of us. I never questioned that trust. That was my first mistake. Around year 7, things started to change. Raymond got more involved with investors. We brought in outside funding from a venture capital firm based in Chicago. They wanted us to scale quick. I was hesitant, but my uncle assured me we can handle it. We're ready. With new money came new structure, bylaws, board seats, share distribution, voting rights. I still had a sizable equity stake, 27%. Raymond held 38%, and the VC firm came in at 25%. The rest was split among early employees. On paper, I was still safe, but in practice, I started noticing subtle shifts. I was excluded from certain high-level meetings. Proposals I submitted for upgrading our dispatch infrastructure were delayed or reprioritized. A new VP of operations, someone I never approved, was brought in from the outside. He started replacing tools I had built with outsourced software licenses that made no sense, just burned cash. And Raymond, he changed too. He stopped calling me partner and started using the word asset. Said it in a joking tone. but it stuck with me. Then came the restructuring. It started with an internal policy to consolidate voting power in the board, allowing majority shares to push through certain decisions without unanimous consent. I raised concerns, but I was outvoted. The VC firm aligned with Raymond every time I was outnumbered 63 to 27. 2 months later, I received an internal acquisition offer. In short, they wanted to buy out my shares at a valuation that was laughably low compared to our projected earnings. They called it a liquidity opportunity. I called it what it was, a hit job. When I refused, they escalated legal pressure, technical audits, an HR complaint that I created friction in strategic execution, complete nonsense, but enough to scare the board into suspending my operational authority. I was relieved of daily duties. My company email was deactivated. I wasn't even allowed to step into the office without clearance. Raymond didn't even call me. He sent a letter. Through legal, I fought for weeks, hired my own lawyer. But the clause in our shareholder agreement, one I had skimmed over years ago, allowed them to force a buyout under performance misalignment. It was legal, cruel, but legal. I ended up selling my 27% for a price far below its real value. 10 years of my life gone. No equity, no severance, no goodbye party. Just a check and silence. I watched from a distance as the company kept moving without me until they started making mistakes I warned them about years before. And that's when the idea of revenge wasn't just tempting, it became inevitable. Looking back, the first real crack in our partnership wasn't a board vote or a financial dispute. It was a dinner. It was late October, year 7 of Collins and Lee, and Raymond invited me to an executive dinner with 2 men I hadn't met before. One of them was wearing a Rolex that probably cost more than my car. The other was sipping a $200 bottle of wine like it was water. Raymond did all the talking. He pitched expansion and national rollout strategy, even floated the idea of going public. I was quiet observing. When he finally turned to me, it was just to say, "Marcus here built the engine. Now we need to let professionals drive it." I smiled politely, but inside I knew what that meant. My seat at the table was shrinking. A week later, I found out those 2 men were senior partners from Prater Capital, the VC firm that would soon invest $14 million into Collins and Lee. Without my full knowledge, I was informed after the term sheet had already been signed. I wasn't entirely sidelined yet. I still had my title, Chief Systems Officer. But in practice, I was being gradually pushed to the margins. Meetings that used to include me were now held behind closed doors. New hires were brought in for scaling operations, a job that, ironically, I had been doing just fine for years. My name started disappearing from internal memos. My opinion stopped mattering. The worst part, Raymond pretended nothing had changed. "Don't worry, kid," he said. "You're still our secret weapon. But weapons are only useful when someone decides to wield them." 3 months after the VC deal, I was invited, more like summoned to a board meeting. The agenda was strategic realignment and future leadership structure. I had a bad feeling. The meeting was held in our downtown Dallas headquarters in the glass-walled conference room. I helped design. Raymond sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 Prater execs. There were printed packets, color-coded charts, and a smiling HR rep in a navy blazer. That's never a good sign. They started with a presentation slides about efficiency growth and redefining organizational dynamics. Then came the pitch. Given where the market is headed, one of the VC guys said, "We believe Collins and Lee would benefit from a more agile leadership structure. We're proposing a streamlined executive model with a new COO overseeing all operational functions." I was confused. That was my role. That was me. I raised my hand calmly. And what happens to my position? They hesitated. Raymond cleared his throat. We're offering you an advisory role moving forward. You'll still be compensated, of course, but day-to-day decisions will fall under the new COO's purview. Advisory role, that was corporate for. We don't want to fire you yet. We just want you out of the way. I didn't yell. I didn't storm out. I just nodded, stood up, and walked out of the room. They followed up with an offer to buy my shares, below market value. Of course, I declined. 2 weeks later, I received a legal notice citing strategic misalignment with board direction. It gave them authority to trigger a forced buyout clause, a detail buried in the shareholder agreement I had signed 7 years ago. When I trusted Raymond like family, I consulted a lawyer. He told me what I already feared. They're playing this by the book. Marcus ruthless, yes, but legal. You could fight it, but it would cost you hundreds of thousands in litigation. I felt sick. I'd built their systems, their infrastructure, their identity, and now they were cutting me out with surgical precision. Then came the final insult. My access to company systems was revoked overnight. Email, VPN, Slack gone. The IT director I had hired myself called me the next morning, nearly in tears. They said it was standard protocol. Marcus, I'm so sorry. Even worse, they started replacing my systems with off-the-shelf garbage tools that didn't integrate, slowed down response time, and created routing delays. I knew the whole house would start cracking, but at that moment, I didn't care. I was too busy grieving the loss of what I had thought was mine. The media never knew. There was no scandal, no headlines, just a quiet purge wrapped in legal language and fake smiles. My uncle never called. Not even once. And just like that, I was out of the company. I co-founded, out of the vision. Out with the family I trusted. But here's the thing about being betrayed by the people closest to you. It doesn't destroy you. It sharpens you. And while they celebrated thinking I was gone for good, I was already laying the groundwork for something they'd never see coming. After they pushed me out, I disappeared. No social media updates, no LinkedIn posts, not even a quiet announcement to my old contacts. I went silent. And in the world of logistics, where every move is tracked and traced, that silence made them nervous. For 6 weeks, I lived like a ghost in Dallas. I ran along the Katy Trail in the mornings, drank bitter coffee in corner diners, and read every logistics trade publication I could find. I wasn't looking for a new job. I was looking for leverage. That's when I found Harrison Bay Freight, a mid-sized firm based in Fort Worth, just 45 minutes west. Quietly profitable, underrated. And bleeding from the same wounds, Collins and Lee was about to open wide. Their CEO, Angela Monroe, had once been steamrolled by a Prater-backed firm in Atlanta. She understood the game. More importantly, she understood revenge. We met at a steakhouse in Grapevine. She ordered her filet, medium rare, and asked me one question. So are you here to work or to make a point? I smiled. Why not both? Within weeks, I joined as head of operational strategy, a made-up title that let me do exactly what I needed rebuild. I took apart their routing system, redesigned their load balancing protocol, and implemented a real-time dashboard for every client shipment. Within 2 months, their on-time delivery rate jumped 18%. Their fuel efficiency improved 22%. And customers started whispering about a new system that just works. But I wasn't done. Because this wasn't just about Harrison Bay Freight. It was about burning a lesson into the skin of everyone who thought I was finished. And the perfect opportunity came in the form of a Department of Defense logistics contract, a multi-year deal worth $62 million. Collins and Lee had held that contract for 3 straight years. It was their crown jewel, their credibility, their foundation. And it was up for renewal. Angela and I studied every line item, every compliance metric, every delivery failure Collins and Lee had logged in the last 12 months. With their new patchwork systems, they were dropping loads, misrouting cargo, and missing performance KPIs by inches. In this industry, inches mean millions. We assembled a proposal that was surgically precise. We underbid by 4%, guaranteed superior load tracking, and offered full integration with DoD systems, something I had built myself back in the day. And then we waited. When the DoD contract was awarded, it came with a short press release. Harrison Bay Freight has demonstrated superior technical capacity, redundancy protocols, and service reliability. Effective immediately, they will assume all regional and national routes under contract DoD 471. I heard Raymond didn't show up to work that day, but that was only the first domino. Over the next 6 months, Collins and Lee began losing other contracts quietly one by one. They didn't know it, but every time they sent out a proposal, I had already seen their pitch. Not because I was spying, because I had built their template system and I knew their pricing logic down to the decimal. So I coached our team to beat them at every turn. Sometimes we undercut them. Sometimes we overserved. We never lost. And as they started bleeding clients, something else happened. Their investors started asking questions. Prater Capital had expected a 3x return by year 3. Instead, they were looking at shrinking margins, client churn, and public whispers that Collins and Lee had lost their edge. Raymond tried to salvage it with a pivot, an expansion into West Coast shipping. But without the systems, the training, or the real-time visibility, it turned into a disaster. Delays, lawsuits. One shipment of medical equipment was stuck in Phoenix for 9 days. That made the news. And all the while, I said nothing. No public statements. No gloating. But the industry knew. They always know. 16 months after I joined Harrison Bay, we doubled in size. We had 3 new regional offices. Our DoD contract was extended for another 2 years. And I was asked to join the executive board as full partner. But I wasn't done, not yet. Because while Collins and Lee was bleeding out slowly, I wanted to deliver the final cut myself. That opportunity came when I heard this little whisper through an old contact in procurement. Raymond's trying to sell the downtown Dallas HQ quietly. They can't afford the lease anymore. Perfect. The building was a 15-story glass-paneled tower in downtown Dallas. Sleek, modern, and over-designed, just like Raymond. I remembered the day we opened it. Raymond had stood outside with the mayor for a ribbon-cutting photo op, shaking hands like he had built the damn company himself. Meanwhile, I was upstairs in the server room debugging a routing error on launch day. Now, 16 months later, the same building was a symbol of their decline. They couldn't keep up the payments, couldn't fill the floors, and couldn't admit it publicly. So they tried to sell it quietly through a commercial real estate broker under a shell company. What they didn't expect was me. I called Angela. "Let's buy it," I said. She laughed. "You sure this is about business?" I didn't answer. We acquired it through a separate holding company, Bayline Ventures, LLC, to avoid any direct connection. Just a clean, quiet deal. No media, no headlines. 3 weeks later, we signed the closing papers. I walked into the building, For the first time since they fired me, it felt colder, emptier, like the soul had been drained out of it. Itty. Raymond's old office corner, suite, 14th floor, still had the same leather chairs, but the lights were off, the blinds drawn, and the reception desk unmanned. I stood in that office for a minute and just breathed, not in victory, in closure. The next day, we sent out the announcement. Harrison Bay Freight is proud to open our new National Operations Center in Dallas, TX, located in the heart of downtown. This new hub will house over 120 staff, including many rehired professionals affected by recent layoffs across the industry. The media picked it up. Then came the emails. Dozens of former Collins and Lee employees reaching out asking if there were openings. Operations managers, IT leads, drivers, even a few VPs. Angela, let me make the final hiring decisions. I said yes to almost everyone, except the ones who stood by silently when I was pushed out. One of the hires, Bethany Cruz, had been my assistant for 5 years. She cried when she saw my name on the email signature. "You were always the brain of the company," she said, "and now you're the heart of this one, Raymond." Meanwhile, was drowning. After the loss of the HQ building, their creditors started circling. Clients kept jumping ship. The DoD blacklisted them after another late shipment violated federal compliance. Prater pulled out completely. They had one final chance, a Series C bridge. Round. Desperate money to keep the lights on, but no investor would touch them, not with Harrison Bay eating their lunch in every market. And so, quietly, painfully, Collins and Lee Logistics filed for Chapter 11. Bankruptcy. No headlines, no drama. Just a one-line notice on the business wire. As of April 4th, Collins and Lee Logistics will begin restructuring under federal bankruptcy code. I was eating breakfast when I read it. No cheers, no fist pumps, just eggs toast. Black coffee that night. I went up to the 14th floor one last time. I stood in that corner office, now ours, and watched the Dallas skyline blink in the distance. 10 years ago, I had built a company with my bare hands, trusted my family, dreamed of legacy. They betrayed me. I could have sued. I could have dragged it into court, into the news, into a messy pile of mudslinging. But I didn't. I simply did what I always did. I built only this time. I built something better, stronger, smarter. And when the time came, I let my silence do the talking. 2 weeks after the bankruptcy, I got an email. Subject interview request, Raymond Collins. It was from our HR director, forwarded from a hiring platform. I opened it slowly, expecting spam, or maybe just a mistake, but no, it was real. Attached was a neatly written resume. Raymond W. Collins, former CEO of Collins and Lee Logistics. Under previous experience, he listed vague leadership roles, completely omitting my name and everything that actually mattered. No mention of how he forced out his co-founder. No note about the failed Department of Defense contracts. No line about the bankruptcy. Just bullet points and buzzwords. Angela stepped into my office. "You saw it?" she asked. I nodded. "He's applying for Director of Vendor Relations." She crossed her arms. "Do you want me to handle it?" I looked at her. "No," I said. "Schedule the interview." In person. 3 days later, Raymond walked through the doors of the building I now owned. He didn't recognize the receptionist, one of our new hires from his old company. He didn't notice the name Harrison Bay Freight etched in gold behind the glass wall. He just walked in, wearing a navy blazer, cheap cologne, and a smile. 2 sizes too wide. I sat in the conference room, backlit by the skyline, waiting. When he entered, there was a pause. 1 full second, where his face froze, as if his brain short-circuited. "Marcus," he said. "Finally." I gestured to the chair. "Have a seat." He didn't move. "What is this?" he asked. "Some kind of joke?" "You applied for a job," I said calmly. "I'm conducting the interview." He sat down slowly like a man entering enemy territory. "This is your company." "It is now." He looked around. "You bought the building." "Yes." Another silence. "You sabotaged us," he finally said. "You took everything." I leaned forward. "No, Raymond. I built something better. You destroyed yourself." His jaw tightened. "You had this planned the whole time." I smiled. "No, but you taught me something. If you're going to get stabbed in the back, make sure you learn how to aim a scalpel." He didn't get the job, but I did send him home with a parting gift, a framed photo of our grand opening day, the one where he shook hands with the mayor while I fixed the broken servers. On the back I wrote, "You should have never underestimated the guy behind the curtain." Marcus, weeks passed. I never heard from Raymond again, but through mutual contacts, I learned the rest. He moved out of state, took a minor consulting gig with a regional transport company in Alabama. Nothing high level, no boardroom, no prestige, no family name to stand behind. Just another man with a title. No one trusted anymore. Karma didn't come like thunder. It came like rust, quiet, inevitable, permanent. As for me, we grew. Harrison Bay Freight doubled our contracts within the next year. Prater Logistics made us their national partner. Our system, designed in the wake of betrayal, became a model studied at 2 business schools. I hired bright kids from underrepresented schools. I gave second chances to drivers with bad luck on their records. We built not just a company, but a culture. One afternoon, Bethany came into my office holding an old Collins and Lee coffee mug she found in the basement. "Want me to throw it out?" she asked. I took it from her. "A size." Turned it slowly in my hands. The logo was faded. The handle cracked. But it still held weight. "No," I said. "Put it on the shelf?" She tilted her head. "Sentimental." I nodded. "Reminds me where I came from and who I'll never become, because revenge isn't always fire and fury. Sometimes it's a quiet office, a second chance, a nameplate on the door that they once took from you, and the satisfaction of knowing you didn't just win, you outlived the storm."